All right, the first thing that we're going to want to do, artists, is use a pencil to lightly draw a horizon line back here. Now our picture is going to be of the snow with a deciduous tree in the front that has no leaves, some evergreens in the back. Maybe we'll use salt resist to create some snow up here in our sky. Also, I'd like you to notice that the sky is darker at the top and lighter as it goes down towards the earth. And this is very typical of our atmosphere. So we're going to do a wet on wet wash to do the sky down to the hill line. So at first, just draw a very light line in here to define your hills. You don't see my line very well because I wanted it to be light. Okay, now I'm going to choose which color I'm going to use. And remember, we need to activate that color. So I'm going to use this green turquoise color, and I'm just putting my water in there to activate that paint. So while that paint gets activated, I'm going to use clean water, a larger paintbrush, and I'm just painting water on my sky, being very careful to go right along that pencil line I drew because I don't want paint in my snowy mountains. Okay, now paint a layer of water across your sky. Do not have puddles. When we do wet on wet, you don't want puddles of water. Okay. Once your paper is wet in the area that we're going to do our wet on wet wash, you should see this sheen. See, you can see the shine here. You don't have puddles of water, but you see a sheen. Now I'm going to take my paintbrush and just pull it across the pigment. We want the darker color at the top. So I'm going to start with laying that color in at the top, and I'm not going to add more color. I'm just going to pull down the rest of the color down to the bottom of my hill line because the atmosphere gets lighter as it gets closer to the earth. So I am leaving it dark at the top, and then here if I get too much color or it's puddling or pooling in a way I don't like, I can rework it with my brush. I can come back in, I can even kind of take some of the water off my brush, pull that paint until I get what I think looks like a nice sky. Now, we cannot paint our trees until our sky dries. We have to have our background dry. So the next technique we're going to do is some dry brush. I'm going to rinse this brush out, put it aside. For dry brush, I like to use a rounded and again a dry brush. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some contour lines back here in our hills. So I want to talk to you guys about contour lines. Contour lines are going to define the way the shape of our hills are, the way our hills are moving. So if we think about this snow hill, might have snow here. Maybe there's a little shadow here where these two hills meet. So I just want to put some lines in here to make my hills look like they are moving, or they have contour, they have shape. So I just barely put my paintbrush in the paint. I don't want it, really don't want it too wet. That's the whole thing of dry brush. So I'm going to take a practice piece of paper and kind of wipe, see how wet that is? I want more of a dry look. So once I start getting loose amounts of paint or where the paper is showing through, where it looks more like texture, that's good. So then I'm going to take my brush, I'm going to lay it very flat to my paper, not up like this, but flat to my paper. So I'm almost just kind of dragging it across, making some contours in the snow that might look like shadows. Remember, we're sticking with one value, just one color. Now, as my colors get closer to me, they're going to get brighter. So I might put some darker colors in front. But again, I want to get rid of the wet, because I want this dry brush look. So I'm using that scratch paper to kind of get all the liquid off of my paintbrush, just so I can pull that dry paint And you're just putting some marks in for contours to look like snow hills. Not a whole lot, because you want snow back there. You want it to look like snow. But what we're doing is we're adding some details to make it look like, oh, there's shadows. And again, these are what we call contour lines. They show you how the snow is moving, how it's piled up into piles. So that is pretty good. Now, we're going to wait a few minutes because I can still see back here in my background, this is not dry yet. And I want it dry when I put my trees back there. Otherwise, they're going to go all up into my sky. So we're just going to take a break. I think my background is dry enough back here. I can feel it's pretty dry to my touch. Not up here. It's still a little wet up there. But I'm only putting trees down here. Now, I also wanted to talk to you guys, if you don't have paintbrushes at home, you could actually paint with Q-tips. You could paint with a sponge. Get creative. But I think most of your watercolor sets usually come with a paintbrush you can use. So we're going to put some trees right along the horizon line back here, and you can use whatever brush you have. I'll just use a Q-tip. I'm going to get my Q-tip wet and dip it in that same color, and I'm just going to lay in some trees. Again, we're just doing the idea of trees, so it's just a shape, no details. We want them darker, obviously, than the sky, but not too dark because they're, again, in the background. So there we go. And then I might move that color over because it looks a little dark compared to the rest of the trees. So I'm just going to finish by putting my trees across my horizon line. Once you get the trees laid in, now we're going to do that drop water technique. So I'm rinsing my paintbrush, and I have clean water on here, and I just want to put some drops of water right on my trees to make the paint spread out and change values. This will give my trees a little bit more of an organic look instead of looking like they're all the same value. You can even just take the paintbrush and dot the water right on there. So you don't want too much water because, again, you don't want big, huge puddles, but we're just creating those water bursts, just like what we practiced a couple weeks ago. All right, so this is a pretty good place for us to stop this week. We're going to let this dry. Don't move it. Let those water bursts just dry and do what they're supposed to do. And you're going to have some different values there in your trees. If you wanted to, you could even come back with a little bit more pigment and maybe put just some drops of darker pigment in spots. So you've got some lighter spots and some darker value of spots of trees. Rinse your brushes, and we're going to stop there for this week.